All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar for this evening. My name is Kim Levinsky, owner and race director for Sasquatch Trail Runners. We put on trail parties throughout northern New Jersey and the Hudson Highlands of New York. We are just less than 2 weeks away from our huge event of the year, the Wild Goose Trail Festival. And as we did last year, we're doing a whole series of webinars to help get you ready for that. But as always, these webinars are applicable for any event you might be training for. So no need to be signed up for the Wild Goose in order to get some good stuff out of this. So tonight we've got Tasha Thor Swartley back in the house. She was here last year leading this webinar. She's been our race medic at several events, and she is coming to us from Colorado. So Thor, thanks for coming on tonight.
Hi, Kim. Oh, it's always such a pleasure to see you, and thank you for having me. I'm normally there attending Wild Goose, and this year I'm actually going to be going to a mountain medicine symposium. So I'm bummed that I'm missing the race. I'm also excited that the information I'm going to take away is only going to benefit everyone overall. So yes, you hit the nail on the head. Like, the information here is not just for your Wild Goose. This is for any and all runners and in all capacities of their races, their run events. And, I'd like to just, first of all, shout out like to everyone that's going out there to the Wild Goose. Don't forget to have a great time. It's a blast out there. And last year was probably the very best in weather. First year was a test. But yeah, I'm excited to be here. So thank you so much for having me on.
Awesome. Yeah, so great. Yeah, last year, I remember at the starting line, I told everybody through the megaphone that it was like a 1 in a million weekend for Sasquatch to have that weather.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the long range forecast, I know it's still a little early to stalk, but it looks real good. So we'll see. We'll see what ends up,
Yay!
what ends up
Yay!
happening. But I
Yay!
think before we jump into the actual webinar, we've got a whole host of questions that were submitted by you guys ahead of time. So we're just going to work our way through that. But I think probably just do a little bit of an intro for Thor. I'll let you do the whole background, but just to fill you all in, we met at a Sasquatch event years ago. I don't even remember what year it was, but she came to a race out at Stoke State Forest and shared that she was I think at that point you had retired from the military, right? Or were you about to retire?
I was retired. Yes.
You were retired at that point. Yeah. Yeah, you were retired at that point, and then you had offered like if you come out as a race medic, and I was so stoked to hear that. And kind of the rest is history. She's been at a bunch of our events and has now goes all around the country as a race medic. So, Thor, I'll let you fill all the gaps there, but can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, born and raised Pennsylvania. I joined the Navy in July 2001, retired in August of 21, moved back to Pennsylvania where I started really diving deep into trail running. Your races were some of the first ones that I started diving back into it. So thank you. And then I was a certified EMT. Like I went to school specifically for wilderness EMT upon my retirement. So by the time I got back to the East Coast, I was working in an ambulance corps with a certification of wilderness, and hence why I opened the door and volunteered my services to support you and the runners out there. Next thing you know it, Kim is introducing me to Destination Trail, and then I'm getting networked to other races. And here we sit in 2025, and I've been working with you. I've been working with Destination Trail. I'm now a medical director for Copper Kings 100 up in Montana. I've worked with Mad Moose. Yeah, and not just as a medic, like not just as an EMT, but I also volunteer just because, like, why not? And then I do run. So this last June was the last race I attempted. It was Tahoe 200, and we're gonna go for it again next year. So yeah, like that's like everything in a nutshell, essentially.
Awesome. I love it. Yes. And that's the thing that makes you such a talented trail race medic, among many other things. But primarily, is you are an ultra runner. So you've been out there, you know what it's like. And you
Yeah.
just have so much, you have so much experience. So I'm excited for you to share a bunch about that experience tonight. So, do you mind if we just start hopping into the questions?
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right. I tried to group them in kind of like somewhat categories so we're not bouncing all over the place. But I think this is a great question to start off with is what are the most common injuries or medical issues that you see at trail races? This will be an interesting one.
I would narrow it down to three. Oftentimes it's going to be blisters. Blisters is the number one. Number two would be like GI related issues, and number three would be joint, so like ankle rolls or from falls. But yeah, blisters number one. GI, that can be everything from vomiting, nausea, bowel, like diarrhea, or even constipation, which can happen on a race course, and then of course like joint injuries. So people are rolling ankles or taking falls and bracing with wrists or knees, like that kind of thing. So those are the most common injuries, I guess you can say. Now, medical issues kind of falls with the GI. Other medical issues would be environmental medical issues, so things like heat illness, or to an extent like hypothermia, and that sums it up out there.
Find it's fairly consistent across the distances, or is it like the longer you go, the more problems arise?
So what I find most consistent is injuries are more consistent in short distance. So your 50-mile and below, I see more ankle rolls, falls, stumbles, palms, skin knees, whatever. Whereas in the longer distances, I'm seeing more medical, so environmental related, so your heat related or cold related illness, and blisters. Now, blisters can happen either or, but I see it more common in the long distance, so 100 miles or more. And then as far as GI can vary. I see more GI in longer distances just because of the nature of the stress that we're undergoing. However, that doesn't mean I haven't seen it in short distances. It's just not as common. And oftentimes I think with short distances, it can be related to heat or anxiety, which race anxiety is a real thing, or just and it could be other things too, but those are the two most common reasons why GI would be upset.
Yeah, that about sums it up. I mean, pretty much anything can happen out there. Um, then this next question I think is great because, and I want you to give a plug for the little kits that you've been putting together and have available. So I saw this and immediately thought like, oh, this is a good one that Thor can like do a little pitch for herself. What
Yeah.
the question is, what first aid materials should a trail runner always have on them during a run?
All right. So basic stuff, right? As a runner, I'm taking EMT hat off. As a runner, I like to make sure I at least have my personal medications. You are taking medications, have those in. You can buy little like jewelry bags or pill bags, mini Ziploc bags, not the sandwich bags, but even smaller, and put them in. And then I always recommend having an instruction sheet on how many you're supposed to take and when. Because if you're doing longer distances, let's say the 100-mile or up, you can lose some state of consciousness. Not saying that you're going to go unconscious, but you might not be able to think straight. So having those instructions will be very helpful in the event that you're not quite sure how to take them and somebody can assist you. Or if they are emergent medications, such as like not so much an inhaler, but yeah, an inhaler, for example. So medications, if you choose to take, choose wisely. Any sort of anti-inflammatory, like a Motrin, be mindful and follow the directions as stated, but you want to limit how many you're taking. So same with Tylenols, because both of those can affect your the NSAIDs tend to affect kidneys, and your acetaminophen or Tylenols tend to affect the liver. So use them moderately. Um, That said, you just want some basic first aid stuff. So yes, thank you, Kim, for allowing me to do a little shout out. I make mini blister slash first aid kits. This is one of my reject packets. But for example, this only weighs about an ounce. And inside of it, I've packaged up everything that you could possibly need on a race course. You get 3 little Band-Aids, and yes, they're all fun Band-Aids. Some are mermaids, some are unicorns, because you got to have fun out there. The key thing is a blade. They're all pre-sealed medical grade blades. They're very sharp. But this blade can be used, it's a multi-use tool, essentially, for lancing your blisters, or if you have like um, dirt or a rock in a wound, you can use this to help pry it out carefully. Um, Always alcohol wipe pads. There's 2 of them in each kit. I also have antibiotic ointments in each kit. Um, this is why this is my reject packet. But I always give gauze sponges. This one's too large, so but I give 2x2 gauze pads in there because you never know how large of a wound you may end up with, and then 2 pre-cut pieces of KT tape. Again, a multi-use. You can put this on for a hot spot coverage or as like a bandage. You can use it to tape the gauze over an open wound. And this material or these products in these kits are used like they're ideally there as a temporary use, right? Because a Band-Aid we know isn't going to stick. So it'll at least get you to an aid station or to the finish if it lasts that long, where you can be treated if needed, or just continue on with your race, and just at least cover the wound so nothing else gets in there.
Awesome. And I love that you showed, I realize if you're listening on the podcast, you can't see what she held up, but for those of you watching in the video, you can see how small it is and how light it is. So really it's not an excuse to not carry stuff with you because it's too heavy or too bulky. What she has there could even fit in, like the shorts these days have the pockets that wrap around, you can stick them in there if you even needed to, but for sure it can fit in a pack, your little first aid kit.
Yes.
Now, this one is a very important question here. Somebody wanted to know, what's your favorite Pop-Tart flavor on the trails?
Oh, I hate to disappoint you.
No Pop-Tarts.
I don't. I grew up like as a kid. I loved them. I loved Pop Tarts. I would go to my best friend's house, and she'll validate all of this. But like, I would go to her house, and her mom would have a stack. Like, she would have chicken noodle soup, pickles, and Pop Tarts, always at the ready for me. And it was always like the cinnamon with the icing was always my favorite, or the strawberry with the icing. But now I can't even look at them.
I don't know who asked that, but it's a great question. Inquiring minds wanted to know.
Yes, but I'm going to flip the script. Kim, what's your favorite Pop-Tart on the trails?
I also don't eat Pop-Tarts on the trails, so we're just disappointing this person all the way around. I don't know when the last time I had a Pop-Tart. It was probably when I was a kid, I guess. Actually, we used to have Pop-Tarts at the aid stations way back in the day, but we don't really do that anymore. They weren't really that popular, actually, at the aid stations. But
no, the nerd clusters are where it's at right now.
I know, those are hot, nerd clusters.
And the Pop-Tart minis are where it's at right now. So
what is that? It's a mini Pop-Tarts?
They're mini bite-sized Pop-Tarts. They come in their own little bag, like a potato chip bag. But yeah, between the nerd clusters and Pop-Tart minis, that's where it's at. That's what I hear on the street.
Forget those like $7 gels. You can just do nerd clusters.
I mean, don't tempt me with a good time.
All right, let's get back into some first aid stuff. So I think this is going to be an insightful question. What is the number one first aid mistake you see trail runners make?
Oh, we're going to go back to blisters, just because it seems to be the most common. Because I'll hone in on blisters, but when it comes to GI issues, a lot of times GI issues like vomiting tends to come from either not eating enough or just your body is kind of repulsing from stress, or it could be repulsing from just too much sugar. When you have vomiting affairs, make sure that you do carry some extra calories in your pack because you don't know if a GI upset is going to happen. But the key thing with that is people avoid eating thereafter, and I don't blame them because I'm a baby when it comes to vomiting too, but you need to try and force those calories back in because otherwise things don't get any better. And then same with like if you have a diarrhea effect, going back to medications and things you should carry, I do always recommend like an Imodium or a Pepto-Bismol to carry because you never know. And with diarrhea, it causes dehydration on top of other physical discomforts, but dehydration is going to be the biggest thing. So we want to try and keep fluids in our bodies. And then the other thing is blisters. So with blisters, if you know you're blister prone, I do recommend pre-taping your feet. But what I see a lot of people do is they're not using, let me rephrase that. They're using material, like blister material, such as like these gummy pads, which are great for short term. And I mean short term, like a couple hours in a pair of shoes, you're going to work, you're trying to break them in, that kind of couple of hours where you're resting on your feet. Whereas we're moving on our feet and we're going through cricks and rocks and things like that, and our feet are moving, and those blister pads, these gummy material, can actually cause more problems than it does benefit. And what I see on the street is when they put these blister pads, these gummy pads on, is what happens is it seals moisture in, and your skin starts to soften. So, which is not good, right? So when we peel away that blister pad, the skin sometimes goes with it. So now we are opening a wound, and which can cause more pain. So the point of what we're trying to do is reduce pain and reduce friction. And that's what the blister pad is meant to do. But in the environments that we're in, those gummy pads don't always work. So when we're pre-taping, the idea of taping a hot spot or pre-taping what could become a blister or you're blister prone in is to reduce the amount of friction between your shoe, sock, and your foot. So less is more. So I always recommend like pre-taping with Leukotape P. You can buy it on Amazon. It is very adhesive, or KT tape works as well. But pre-taping or taping a hot spot is the other half of it. People want to just like hurry up and get to the aid station, or they want to get to where their material is. Well, if you already have KT tape on hand, you can tape your hot spot between aid stations and such. But taping that hot spot at the soonest time available will prevent a blister from forming. That said, not all blisters, once those blisters are lanced, those blisters can reform and refill. So these are things just to keep in mind that we are preventing as much as possible, but again, movement's going to cause things to happen. So first aid mistake, cover those blister hot spots before you get on a race. As soon as a hot spot starts to develop in the middle of a race, cover it, get it touched up. If a blister does form, lance it and cover up with tape.
Okay, awesome. I do want to break down a couple of things because, as you know, we have a lot of new trail runners that come out to our events. A lot of them are trying trails for the first time. So we always try to kind of like break down the lingo a little bit. So a couple things you said, maybe you could explain a little bit.
Sure.
What is a hot spot? You want to
Okay.
just explain like what it is, how you can recognize it, and then you've said lancing a couple times, so maybe explaining what that is too. I think would be helpful.
Yeah, so we'll cover lancing. Lancing is popping. It's just more of like an appropriate term because when we pop, we think of like squeezing, like a pimple. We don't want to do that with a blister. But lancing is just creating a pocket for fluid to move out of that blister, or popping the blister. Hot spot. So if you think of friction, friction is when two objects are moving together and they create warmth. And on your foot, that warmth is what we call a hot spot. And that hot spot will eventually, possibly, or maybe not, turn into a blister. A blister is formed when friction is happening over and over and over again. Think of like a machine, two gears running together. And what your body does, what a blister actually is fluid buildup to try and protect the skin and the tissue beneath it. So um, by when you feel those hot spots, they feel warm. Like it feels unmistakable, because you're as you're moving, you just feel like, wow, the bottom of my foot just feels really warm right now, or slightly painful. And it's like, okay, or the back of the heel tends to be a very common one. The back of my heel, it feels like there's a blister forming. We call those hot spots. So those are spots that we want to cover up to help reduce that friction and that contact between your shoe sock and your foot, which will help reduce the formation of a blister.
That is perfect. That is good. I think a lot of times, when you're starting your running journey, you don't figure these things out until you're left with a foot full of blisters. And so this is great. I think for folks who are listening who are newer to the trail scene, this can hopefully prevent some pain and discomfort. So let's since we started talking about feet, I'm going to bounce to the feet question. Um,
Great.
so let me scroll down here. Okay. You touched on this a little bit, but let's go through it maybe a little bit more in depth here. What type of tape do you
Yeah.
recommend? I know you mentioned Leuko tape and KT tape, but do you want to expand on that at all? If not, we could go to the next question.
So KT tape comes in various forms. This is a cheaper form, but they do have some of the branded KT tape. Also has KTX or KT Strong, whatever. But the reason why I recommend this is some people are afraid of this one because the adhesive on KT is a little bit less strong than the adhesive on Leuko. Either way, both tapes are going to help with the prevention of, or like prevention, but also like minimizing your blister. I have a preference for Leuko tape just because it feels more like a skin versus the Leuko, or excuse me, with the KT because it has more of a fibrous feeling. But again, it's going to be personal preference. So to solidify it, Leuko tape P or KT tape, and you can buy it all on Amazon. Leuko you can't find in the stores, so yes, you can buy it on Amazon. But you can find KT in the stores, or you can buy it in bulk online as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I remember when I did Tahoe 200, the medics gave a firm warning and instruction that at the end of the race, when you go to take the Leuko tape off, you have to soak it and don't just rip it off because the adhesive is that strong. So that was pretty
Yes,
intense.
yes, yes. And like, and that's why I love it the most because it's going to last longer. Um, but again, it's personal preference. I use Leuko tape for myself. I haven't had any issues, and yes, what you heard from the medics is the same thing I tell folks. Like, please don't just go rip it off like a band-aid. Please, I beg you, please, please, soak it first, and then be gentle on your peel off, especially with as sensitive as your feet are going to be.
Totally, totally. Okay. Again, you started to touch on this, but I think you can definitely go much more in depth. So this runner wants to know, should runners ever pop a blister or is it better to pad/protect it?
So mid-race, yes, pop the blister. And kind of a backstory with it. Standard medicine, our front country, our ambulance workers, and so on, the folks that are living in a hospital, working in a hospital, they're going to always tell you, no, we're opening wounds. However, they're not trained in wilderness, or some may be, right? But in wilderness medicine, what we're trying to do is minimize pain, minimize discomfort. And a blister can cause a lot of discomfort. So that said, you're also, depending on the depth of the blister, most blisters are what we call superficial. They're just beneath the very first layer of skin. So you're not actually opening the door to the tissue beneath your skin and big room for infection, right? That's a good thing, right? We don't want to do that. Is there risk for infection? Yes, always. However, when we're in a wilderness setting, you're in a race setting, I always recommend lance the blister, because what it's going to do is the longer that blister is there, the more pressure it's going to apply to the location that it's in. So if it's on the back of your heel, you're going to continue to feel your shoe, your sock pushing on it. Every time you move your foot, you're going to feel that pressure. Eventually, it's going to pop. So you might as well take advantage of the time you have and lance the blister, or pop the blister. I always recommend using a blade, which in my kits I always provide, but you can use, if you know what hypodermic needles are, they're the same needles that you would get injections with. You can buy those, or you can use your safety pins. Just do your best to try and sanitize it if you have the ability to do so. If not, upon race, just make sure that you clean it, like clean your body and clean the location and keep it clean and monitor. That said, once you lance it or pop it, I always recommend applying a tape over it. Now, we can get much more in depth as far as like if the wound is open, etc. But as far as like basic blister, the hood of the blister, the skin is still in contact, and the only thing you did was just poke a hole in there and help move fluid out of the blister. You can apply tape directly over that skin. If we start to encounter skin removal, we want to try and save that skin. If it's still attached, we want to try and lay it over that tissue, because that's a protective layer. In which I would recommend, in that case, like if you have the Band-Aids, you can use a Band-Aid to put over top and then secure that Band-Aid with a piece of KT or Leuco tape. And what that Band-Aid is doing is it's the gauze on the Band-Aid puts that protective layer so the tape doesn't stick directly to that loose skin. Finally, if we do have a blister where the skin just gets removed, that's when we want to treat it like an actual wound, all right? So like a boo-boo for, which you can use gauze, right? Or you can use a Band-Aid, or if the Band-Aid, like if you don't want the sticky part of the Band-Aid, I've cut the gauze out of a Band-Aid and use that, because we want to minimize how much padding we're putting on this blister. But covering it up and dressing it like an actual wound is going to help protect it, but also we don't want to apply tape directly to the open nerves, because eventually that tape's going to come off, and we want to make sure that we are keeping our skin and our pain levels to a tolerable level. Now, all that said, is it going to take all the pain away? Not always, but it's going to reduce it, because now you don't have that pressure. The other thing with padding and so on is the idea of what we want to do is minimize as much padding as possible between the shoe and our foot. More padding only equals more pressure, equals more pain. So which is why we want to keep it to the bare minimum, which is why, like, thinking outside the box, like creating the donuts, old school method where we create a donut bandage where the blister would be open inside of a donut bandage. That can work, but lancing is always going to be the best, because we're reducing how much fluid is in there, and then using minimal bandage material to keep that level of padding very like low, so that way you don't have all that pressure sitting on your foot.
Ooh, gold mine right there. That was awesome. And
I know it's a lot, I'm sorry.
what's your saying about feet? You have like a tagline for feet, right?
Oh, I do. I hate feet, but in order to get to your soul, I got to go through your feet.
There it is.
There's that one, or Thor hates feet, but Thor loves you.
One right there. We got to make you a T-shirt with that. I got to remember to do that.
I know, that'd be great.
All right, we got a couple more heat questions. So this one I think is great, and I know you mentioned it last year on the webinar. And a lot of people I've talked to, like throughout the year, have said they've learned this from you, and it's really helped. I know personally, I do what you're about to recommend, and it makes a very big difference. So, do you want to talk about yes, how should I prep my feet for race day as well as general daily foot care? This is the stuff where you're gonna, I think, teach a lot of people right here. So how would you answer this question?
First of all, I'm just glowing because I'm starting to see from the sidelines, people are like listening and like taking the advice, and oh my God, it's making my work better. like, so let's go into general foot care pre-race. Let's look at the myth of like, oh yeah, rugged feet, strong feet. Like, yeah, the more callous, the better. Erase that all from your mind. Strong feet, yes, we want strong feet, but we want soft feet. So for those of you that are afraid to go get a pedicure, man, you're missing out. But you don't have to get like baby soft feet, but just get those calluses reduced to an absolute minimum. Because what is callus? Callus is dead skin, and what it's going to do is cause friction. So like a Velcro, it'll stick to your sock, and then everything beneath that callus is just going to move, and it's going to cause blisters. So less callus, soft feet equals minimal blisters. I know you're all probably thinking like, wait, what? This girl's crazy. No, it works. I assure you. I also hate getting pedicures, but I do for the few weeks prior to. So I always recommend at least a month prior to race day. Getting pedicures if you can, at least once a week, maybe every 2 weeks. You don't need to, and you don't need to go fancy. But also lotioning your feet at night. Since you're not going to be putting your feet in shoes, things like that, your body will be able to absorb that lotion. If you like to wear socks at night, it helps keep the lotion in. If you don't, that's okay too. But yeah, lotion your feet at night will help soften them up and moisturize them. So come race day, you're going to have minimal friction. So that's pre-race. Now, race day, I always recommend if you know you have blister-prone areas such as the heel, the big toe, your pinky toe, pre-tape. So tape those babies up before, like an hour or two before you get out to the start line, so that way the adhesive is sticking. And then I always love toe socks because they reduce the friction between the toes. If you're not into the toe socks, go in Gingy, by the way. If you're not into the toe socks, that's okay too. You don't have to. They just do a really good job of reducing friction. Also, lubricate your feet. So in order, you want to, on race day, if you plan to pre-tape your feet, clean feet, dry feet, tape feet, lubricate, and then put your socks on. And all that in that order. And the reason we don't want to lubricate before we put tape on is because the tape's not going to stick to an oily foot. So we want to make sure that our skin is dry so the tape adheres better. Once you are done with the pre-taping, you're done. You're done. You get the lubrication on, get your socks on, then you go, and get your head straight and go have a great time. And then all of that. So that's all I can stay prepping. I was going to keep going, but I'm sure there's more questions, so I'm just going to leave it at that for right now.
I think that's awesome. Again, let's break down a couple of the terms and stuff you said. Lubrication. Do you want to go through like maybe some examples of that? Your preferred foot lube of choice. What do you got?
Yeah. So there's various. So lubrication is essentially like an oil. All right. So if you're going to cook something on a pan, we want to oil the pan. Well, we don't want to cook our feet, so we're going to oil our feet, right? We want them to stay as smooth as possible. So we know about like anti-chafing stuff. My favorite is always squirrel's nut butter, but you can put this on your feet as well. So in a deodorant stick style, you can just like, you can do the foot like this, but you're not going to really get in between the toes. So you can just use your hands and get in between the toes. They also have those packet style ones. Like you can use other brands or other types of lubrication. Is Desitin. It's a diaper rash ointment. Works phenomenal. Or Salty Britches, Vaseline, Aquaphor. All of these different products are for, they reduce friction is really what it's doing. It's lubricating in between your body parts. So again, you want to make sure the tape is on before you apply a lubricant, or in this case, like a anti-chafe, like a salve of some sorts. Do you want to reapply that every now and again? Absolutely. Because like as you're moving through a course, if you're deciding to change your socks, or if you are in a sandy course, some of those particles can get into that and it can cause some friction, right? So we want to make sure that you know, do your best to clean your feet if you're going to change your socks, and then reapply a lubricant after so. Oh, hold on. I don't know what happened. I can't hear you, Kim.
That's because I had the mute button on. Oh boy. my, my apologies. It's not you, it's me. The comment that just came in, squirrel's nut butter is great. I sometimes use shea butter as well. That came from Black Action Figure Vault on
Love
YouTube.
it.
Um,
Yes. Oh, thanks for the tip. Yes, squirrel's nut butter is amazing.
Let me ask you one more follow up with the lube, adding your lube to feet. Because again, new runners, no dumb question. When you're putting the
Yeah.
lube on your feet after you've taped, what happens if you get some of the lube on the area that it's taped? Or are you supposed to put it on the area that's taped? Like where are we putting the lube?
Everywhere. Put it everywhere. Put it over the tape. Don't be shy. The whole point of what we're trying to do is reduce the amount of friction that we're having or could possibly have. So tape is there to help reduce some of that, but the lubrication is just going to like up the ante of prevention. So yes, put it on over top of the tape, as well as like in between your toes. Get it all up to your ankle, the arch of your foot, like baby your feet. Like your feet are working so hard for you, and they deserve to be well cared for.
Awesome, awesome. I would recommend, and I'm sure you would as well. Perhaps having like if you have the deodorant stick type of lube, having a separate one for separate body parts, I think is always a very good idea. Because I've seen some stuff out there on the trail. It's a little, it's not good. So try to have separate sticks for separate things there. Um,
Or
yeah,
glove.
yeah.
Glove. Like if you have the tin
Mm,
versions, which I actually do have that on hand as well. You have the tin versions where you're gonna like do the scoop and apply gloves, because there are some areas that have seen some better days, and having a glove just keeps your hands clean.
yes, yes, and another great item to throw in your kit is just a little hand sanitizer thing. If you think about all the things you're doing as first aid and foot care and lube, and then you're reaching into a bag of chips, like let's hit those hands with some hand sanitizer.
I mean, those nerd clusters probably taste better with a little bit of dirt. I'm just saying.
Oh, num 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 nums. All right, let's do one more foot care question that came in from a runner. This is a great question. Should I remove a black toenail by myself, by a doctor? Should I let it drop off naturally?
Oh, I love the gross toenails. Okay, so if we're talking after a race, oftentimes that black toenail is going to be fresh, and it's black because there's a blister underneath it. So what I would recommend first and foremost is if this is something that is developed on the race course, you can lance that blister, pop that blister. That said, I don't recommend going through on like a fingernail where we would actually like puncture through the nail. I don't recommend it on the toes because it's more painful. But oftentimes underneath the nail, so if we're looking at as if it's our foot and the bottom of our palm is the palm of the foot or the planter of the foot, you can actually lance underneath that length of the nail because oftentimes that's where the blister has formed is under the nail bed. So you can insert a small needle to there and it will help reduce some of that fluid from under the nail. Or at the cuticle where the nail meets the body of the skin, okay? If there is a blister that formed there. Once the nail, so what happens is like there's like either coagulated blood that forms. Coagulated blood is just like solidified blood that forms underneath the nail. And it's not so much that the nail dies, it's just not getting body fluid or in this case nutrients. So that part of the nail ends up just kind of like growing off the skin and why it wants to fall off. So can you let it drop off naturally? Yeah, if you want to, you can. Do you want to pull it out? So there's risk with pulling or removing the black a dead toenail, essentially yourself, because if there is fresh tissue that is still like really good healthy tissue that is still attached to it, you could open the door for wound, right? And wound means infection, right? So we want to prevent that. However, if it's like hanging on for dear life, I would recommend try to cut it. Or if it's not something you really have the guts to do, it's not a pretty sight. Or if it comes off naturally, great. But if you don't have the guts to do it, it is okay. And I always recommend seeing a doctor just because we don't know the depth of how far back that nail is separating from the skin. And if you try to pull it, you could pull some tissue out with it. And it's not pretty either. And Kim, I'm so sorry I'm grossing you out.
So graphic. So graphic. But please continue.
You should see it in person.
The people want to know. People want to know.
They do. It's a valid question. It is. It is an absolute valid question because I have done it on race courses, like for other people. And then like I personally have never lost a toenail. Like I cannot relate to this at all, but like I've done it for others. I always recommend though, if you don't have the guts to do it or let it drop off naturally, please go see your doctor because then it's in a sanitary state. They can at least, do all the things, like clean. But if it's getting to a point where you just don't want to see a doctor and you don't want to let it drop off, try to cut the nail as close as you possibly can to the skin where it connects with the body. I'm so sorry for all the folks that are just like gagging right now.
Mostly me. I'm just like, woo, woo. Let's move on. No, it's good. It's good we're talking about it because this is stuff that really happens out there. So,
yes.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I lied. We have one more foot question. So
Great.
this is a good one. How do you handle trench foot? So definitely talk about what exactly is trench foot. And this is going to be really important if we do have any sort of weather, which right now the forecast is looking very nice, but it could change. So let's talk about wet feet.
Okay, so trench foot by definition is when the nerves are damaged after being exposed to cold exposure and wetness for a long time. Oftentimes, runners don't always develop a trench foot by definition, right? So, and I learned this not just from like reading, but also from Tanya, who's the co-author of Fixing My Feet. Like she and I had an awesome conversation about this. So oftentimes we see is like maceration, or I can't think of the medical term, but basically waterlogged feet. So what I always recommend, especially with waterlogged feet, is we'll talk first about how to handle it and then talk second about what we can do to prevent it. Handling it is you need to let it dry. If you're mid-course, let's say you're doing the Wild Goose 100, you've got some time to spare and you're going through the cricks that are out there. Um, what I would recommend is once you get back to your aid station, to the central location, get your shoes and socks off and just like, if you have the option to put a fan on them to dry the soles of your feet, do it. Or if you have somebody who's kind enough to wave a fan on your feet to kind of expedite the drying process, do it. But every chance you get to, get your shoes and socks off to allow the sole of your foot to dry. That is key. We don't want to get too far into what could happen. Like if the skin starts separating, then that's a whole different level of wound care. But preventing it and handling it is just honestly really do your best to dry it when it starts to waterlog. That said, prevention. So how do we prevent trench foot, or in this case, like waterlogged feet? We want to do our best to prevent it by changing our socks every single chance you get to. So I know with Wild Goose, for example, you're coming in, you're on the different loops. If you have the opportunity to change your socks in every single loop, do it. It's not going overboard. You're not doing anything more than you need to. You're taking care of your feet. They're doing a lot for you. So, and it's okay if you only have that one pair of shoes and you're changing your socks 6 times. That's okay. You still have a dry layer to absorb moisture before your foot does. Otherwise, your foot's going to absorb the moisture if you consistently wear the same socks and they consistently get soaked. So change your socks, change your socks, change your socks always. And then what I found myself recommending is that people carry a pair of socks with them in their pack if you have the room, space, and carriage to, because socks are a multi-use clothing item. They work as gloves. They work if you need to change your socks. They work great for tissues, bloody noses, the whole works. And then like wound care, if you end up having to need a bandage, like a bigger bandage, you can use the sock. Same with a buff. But anyways, yeah, so change your socks often, and should you develop some waterlogged feet, just do your best to dry them. Standard fans work, or if you have a vehicle in the parking lot, I've seen folks put your feet in the dashboard vents, turn with your vehicle on, and use that as a means to dry them.
Awesome. Very, very helpful. We had a question that just popped up and this will link right to what you were saying. What are some advantages of wearing toe socks?
Besides the fact that like they're just so cozy and all your little toes have all the freedom to move, um no, there's a huge advantage, right? So when we talk about foot care and we talk about prevention of things like blisters, we talk more about how do we reduce the friction of our skin to skin contact. So we want to reduce skin to skin contact, which is what causes in some cases hot spots, ultimately blisters. So with the toe socks, we are essentially putting cloth, like a pair of gloves, around individual toes, which is reducing that skin to skin contact, ultimately reducing friction, reducing the blister formation, and it keeps your toes warm.
Yes. I'm a big fan of toe socks as well. I love the Injinjis. They've worked well over the years.
Yes, likewise.
Thor, we are winding down, so we'll do a couple more questions. This one, it actually wasn't submitted by a question, but I do think it's important to bring up because it is something that I have seen enough that I think it'll be helpful for folks to hear you talk about it a little bit. So, a lot of times I'm standing at the finish line, runners come in, they're talking with their crew, and I get to overhear, some stuff that's going on. So I have heard runners say, "Oh, I just went to the restroom and my blood is kind of like, or my urine is
Mm.
bloody or it's really dark. So do you want to touch on that? And I think that'd be helpful for folks to learn a little bit more what that means, what you should do.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a scary thing, and that's very understandable to be scared of it, right? So first and foremost, the questions to be asked upon hearing something like that is, how often are you drinking? What are you drinking? And how much? So if they're, let's say it's a 5 mile loop, and they say, well, I haven't drank anything in this 5 miles. Well, in a trail race, that's, let's say, an hour. Well, that's an hour without fluids, but you're expending a lot. And we're going to look at the situation like for Wild Goose, you're sweating a lot with the humidity there. So you're expending more than you're intaking, meaning you're dehydrated. So we want to validate, like, okay, how much have you had to drink overall? Are you including electrolytes? Are you drinking just electrolytes or just water? Because you need to have a blend of both. Because when you're sweating a lot, you're sweating out all those minerals that your body still needs. So you need to make sure you are replenishing. So those are two big things that we want to ask: is like how much water you're drinking, and when was the last time you drank. So we want to try and get some fluids in this person. The other thing is, which is where we start to get to more of like an advanced questions, is, are you having any lower back pains? Are you having um, like severe muscle cramp in the hamstring or the back of the legs or the back, right? So what we're looking for there is something we call rhabdo or rhabdomyolysis, which is the breakdown of proteins in your body, basically breakdown of the muscle tissue. And your kidneys are what form the urine, right? So we're doing a little physiological science here, but when proteins break down, the kidneys don't have the ability to break down the protein aminos. They're too big, right? So we're trying to put a square in a circle, and it doesn't work. So oftentimes we start to see a bloody color urine, which is why it's hard to distinguish dehydration to rhabdo, and both can be the same. So we want to make sure that we push fluids on somebody who is saying, like, I have dark colored urine. And oftentimes what I would recommend doing is, if they do have dark colored urine, start pushing some fluids, and then make them pee in a cup. So, and take a picture of said, of the urine in the cup after they've made their deposit, right? And what I'm looking for is the product of the hydration. So this can take some time. So please be mindful of it, because we want to make sure that you don't go out there dehydrated. That's worse than anything else. Your body needs to stay hydrated. So by taking a picture of your urine deposits in the cup, because like you can only see so much color when it's coming out of your body. So producing it in a cup just allows to see that color change every time you urinate. So staying back at the aid station, try to force some fluids in the person. And we could do this naturally. We don't need to go see the EMTs and the medic just quite yet for IVs. Like, you're not there. So doing it naturally, just drinking some fluids, and then progressively seeing the body get better. Next to the suspicion of rhabdo or rhabdomyolysis, um, that requires advanced medical care, which is why asking about the back pains, asking about the infrequency or lack of urination, and things like that. Like, we start talking more in depth of like having to get more advanced care, and that's going to require a hospital visit and IV fluids.
Very helpful. Very helpful. Let's do one last question because we're coming up on the hour. This is another common one that I see at trail race events. Is how do you know when it's just a sprain versus a more serious injury like a fracture? So this is something I see often, where if folks maybe roll their ankle and then they're trying to figure out, like, should I keep running or should I just call it a day?
It is so hard because you can't see what's going on beneath the skin. So I want you to keep that in mind. A sprain is a tendon, a strain is a muscle, and a fracture is a bone. So now we know the differences, right? Oftentimes sprains are going to happen out there. You might have rolled your ankle. Do we know if it's a fracture or sprain? No. It's going to require advanced care. It's going to require an x-ray to really validate what the depth of that injury could possibly be. Now, we're going to put our runner hats on. And have I made these decisions? Yes, as a runner. Have I made these decisions as an EMT? Not quite, because it's ultimately up to the runner. So if you feel, so one of the things you want to check for is mobility, right? If it's an ankle roll, do you have full mobility? Are you able to put weight on it, right? So can you move normally within limits of if it's a sprain or strain? But can you move normally? Okay, then that's okay, because we don't know if it's a fracture unless the bone is actually projecting out of the body or it is a deformed body part, like then we know something's severely wrong. But as far as a sprain or a strain, we can't tell. So what I always recommend is if you're able to have full mobility, rotation, none of your sensation in your foot or circulation is limited, that's ultimately going to be up to you whether you want to continue or not. If your mobility is limited, if your circulation in your foot or joint is limited, meaning that you can't really feel a pulse or things are starting to discolor, you really need to get seen at the soonest. Or if your sensations have changed, so if it's like super tender or if it's like no sensation at all, like numbing, those are like reasons why you would want to not continue onward. Other than that, like it really falls back into the runner's lap, because we can't see what's going on underneath the tissue, underneath the skin.
Awesome. Very, very, very helpful.
Oh,
Um,
good.
Thor, I'll give you a chance to put any last remarks, but I'm going to put a couple of things out there. Just reminders. We've got all this info in our website and Trail Party Handbook. Just reminder that if you feel like you would need something like Tylenol or Advil, you need to bring that or any other meds. We don't give out meds at our events. The EMTs aren't going to give out meds, no IVs, anything like that. So whatever you anticipate needing, bring it with you. I mean, we've got a full first aid kit and the EMTs and ambulance will be there with their supplies, but it's always great to bring your own. And I think Thor would agree on this is that all the foot care stuff we talked about in terms of taping and blisters and stuff, you're really going to help yourself if you can practice ahead of time. So even
Yeah.
if you're not like about to go out for a run, you can practice taping yourself. Do it a couple times before a run. Go out and run with your feet taped. And there is definitely a learning curve to figure out like how you like to do it. And the other thing I'll mention too, if you're bringing a crew out and you anticipate a whole foot care routine is going to be part of your race plan, talk about that with your crew. And even if you have the opportunity, before the race, sit down, take out the tape and say, this is how I like to tape my feet, because mile 85, it's going to be hard to connect the words in the brain and telling your crew. But I just want to mention those few things. Thor, do you have anything to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, so if you guys follow me on Instagram, Thor Trail Race Medic, no spaces, nothing else. There's some how-to videos on how to do taping of your feet. So I recommend checking those out. You can also hit me up directly if you guys are interested in your own little first aid packs. Message me on my Thor Trail Race Medic Instagram page. Or if you have any other questions outside of this, you can message me through there as well. Last tips, right? So those of you that are going into these races, I'm going to leave you with 4 things, all right? To accomplish a race, all right, for your 100 milers and below, you just need to eat, drink, take care of your feet, and move forward. And remember that forward is a pace. So forward is a pace. Have fun. You're going to do great. Thor loves you, and I hate your feet.
That is amazing. What a great well wishes to everybody there. Thor, we are really gonna miss you at the race this year. But hopefully you'll be able to come back out in 2026. But this has been incredible. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge with us tonight.
Always a pleasure to see you, Kim. Yeah, I'm bummed that I won't be able to make it out there. My spirit will be sent to you guys, and I'll be at the ready if there's any questions that you may have, whatever, or if a runner may have. I'll be available as best I can. But yeah, I'll put it on the calendar in advance for next year. But sending my love to all of you guys. And Kim, it's always a pleasure to see you. And I know that the runners are going to be in great hands under your care.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Thor. Well,
Welcome.
thank you all for tuning in tonight with our webinar. If you're listening to the podcast, thanks for listening or watching the replay. We appreciate that. We still got spots for the Wild Goose Trail Festival, distances from kids 1 mile, 10K, half marathon, 50K, 50 mile, 100K, 100 mile, 36 hour, and volunteer dream team. We still need more volunteers. We have record number this year for runners. We've got over 370 people signed up so far. It's very exciting. It's really cool. But that means we need more help with volunteers. So spread the word. You can register for the race or volunteer via our website, which is sasquatchtrailrunning.com. And we're going to wrap it up here. So thanks again, Thor. And everybody have a good night and keep it squatchy until we see you again.
Happy trails!